today now to kind of generate some insightful discussion around a number of topics. And as I mentioned in getting started, we'll start off with, as Microsoft continues to build a complete suite of business tools, it's very comprehensive. So what are the advantages and maybe sometimes disadvantages of heavy reliance on Office 365? So Guy, would you like to kick it off?
We did a transition to Office 365 about 18 months ago, and in many respects it was a very positive transition. From the biggest challenges we had actually were a lot more internal and culture, and from both an IT and a user perspective, the users actually embraced the change with all the new apps that they've got. But from an IT perspective, actually moving to the cloud for a lot of the services which were managed internally, it went against the culture of a lot of the IT personnel. People wanted, our sysadmins, their worth was based on how many servers they had in the server room. It was natural to them. They wanted more servers, when actually we were saying, look, you don't have to manage Exchange anymore. It's gone into the cloud, which for them actually made them feel uneasy. For me, it was a step in the right direction. And I think there is that tradition within IT of having more control over what goes out there, what gets deployed. And I guess that's the same with Office 365 and the apps as well. Now it is a constant delivery of new apps. It's no longer the fact that we're on Office 2013 and we're going to move up to 2016. It's a continuous rollout. And I think you need a slightly different attitude on how you bring that into the business, and obviously making sure that the IT people aren't actually scared of that kind of change and losing some of the control as well. That's how I've kind of seen it.
That's really interesting. So I'm curious if anybody else can kind of tie into what you've just said. So you're saying that in this change, it's the IT that struggles a little bit with control, where the users are finding it like greater acceptance. What other thoughts does the panel have on that observation?
I can certainly go from the working with the legal industry on that, because there is, as you can imagine, a lot of nervousness around moving to the cloud, both from the internal IT perspective, but also from the lawyers and their clients. And it's an interesting dynamic, because from what we can see, that it's beneficial in many cases to move to the cloud from a security point of view, because frankly a law firm, however good their security is never going to be able to match the investment that Microsoft can put into ensuring security. But that's a hard message to get across, and it's a hard message to get across to your clients. If your clients are demanding certain types of security, that can really hold back any move into the cloud. And it's one that we're constantly having a debate with our customers about.
Interesting. And we're kind of pulling both, the cloud and Office 365 into kind of the same conversation.
Yeah.
Kind of going back, maybe shifting just a little bit back to, let's say, the reliance, if you will, on Office 365. And I do want to continue this pursuit of some of the cloud transformation and so forth. Any thoughts on some of the, the overall advantages? I know in listening to your interview, Cheryl, that you had lots of comments about, how you're consulting with organizations to effectively use these tools. So obviously, and all of us here probably, view the Office 365 as having lots of advantages. What are your observations on, the advantages and potential disadvantages of a reliance on Office 365?
I think there's a lot of fear. Obviously, we work with a lot of SME businesses, and I think there's still a lot of fear around what the cloud is, what 365 is. There's still a perception that 365 is just an email exchange. And I think this is a problem, is because the roadmap is changing so fast. There's a real lack of awareness and knowledge around what those tools are that are prevalent within 365 and how they can really help to support a business. I mean, for certain small business owners, they wear very many hats within a business, and they want to feel that sense of connectedness. They want to be connected to their own teams, connected to their customers, connected to partners. And I think there's the current sort of disadvantage is there's still that focus on tools rather than data. and what's being created rather than the tool that's being used to use it. And I think there's a big gap in terms of understanding and knowledge about how they can use it to the best advantage within their businesses. There's a huge education piece that's missing.
Completely agree, and I think a lot of it is that message about what is Office 365. Like, so people see, is it just Outlook in the cloud kind of thing? And a lot of that, I think, is this message is such a dynamic product, changing all the time. People get a bit confused with actually what they're getting. They see all these apps now on the desktop, and you've got things like Yammer, you've got Teams, and you've got Skype for Business with a massive overlap of what they can do. And I have a lot, and obviously in SharePoint as well, in some respects, from a document point of view. And you're saying, well, where do we host a particular type of discussion? Where should we host a project? And actually, you can do it in every single one of them. You can do it over email as well if you wanted to. And there's not always a natural way of doing things, I find. And I think there's an education element to that. And I think a lot of that as well is down to things like the acquisition of Yammer. You've got this tool in there which wasn't a Microsoft product. It's now in the Microsoft suite, yet it does things which can be done already in the suite. And that in itself, without clear guidance, you will end up with two teams doing the same kind of work using two different tools. And actually it might work well for them, but from an organization point of view, it can be a bit confusing and not always productive going forward.
I think I'd agree with you, Guy. I mean, we've certainly seen that. And I think I was just picking up on a comment that was also made, that you also made about IT. IT are now, you've got this user community who are desperate for connectedness, are desperate for working in a different way. That, there's a real appetite in some companies and real culture for it. And IT are having to then offload this stuff out quickly, but there's no clear roadmap in terms of educating the users. And we spend a huge amount of time putting together use cases and examples of how the tools are applicable and when to use them. And I think that's really beneficial for companies, because otherwise what's happening is that, these tools are being rushed out, people are using them, but they're not using them in an effective manner, in a way that's kind of right for the organization. So then everyone starts to get frustrated and confused as to what they're trying to do and achieve.
What's interesting is, Alex, I recall from your interview that you talked specifically about, the way Microsoft rolls things out. There's so much going on. What are your thoughts on this topic?
I think what's quite interesting about this particular opportunity is that I find that Microsoft, there are so many tools that Microsoft are trying to clarify their position themselves at this point, and then pushing everything to MS Teams, Skype for Business, Yammer, for instance, getting all those collaboration tools into MS Teams. We're using that particular technology in a couple of teams within the business at the moment. We tried rolling Yammer out, that didn't work very well at all. Skype for Business, we use a lot and have integrated. So I generally find the pace of change is so huge that actually we've got a dual role here. Is that we're going to make sure that we use the technologies ourselves, but also, of course, it's what we're trying to sell for Microsoft and on their behalf. And actually, it's very complicated to sell these products. What we find is that people start off with, particularly if they're using a cloud CSP license as an example, we often find that they use a low-grade one and then upgrade pretty quickly when they find that some of the tools aren't available to them. So it's clear that they want those tools. Sometimes they don't necessarily know how many that they want or what they want, but actually they tend to upgrade their licenses quite quickly once we've moved them to the cloud in the first place.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Tom, you mentioned that you're going through quite a transformation with you're in a real estate-oriented business. And so with the advantages and disadvantages, what are your thoughts on with Office 365?
We are a franchise company predominantly. And so we're effectively a collection of small businesses. And from a head office perspective, it's far easier for us to roll things out because we're a fairly cash-rich company. And therefore, we effectively invest where we need to. But if you talk to a franchisee who's effectively a one-man band or has a small team, to actually take a leap of faith away from the traditional on-site server, local exchange into the cloud, it's quite a scary transition. Where I personally believe that things are going to be going, especially for small businesses, is I can see that the role of a server or old-fashioned server in terms of storing files is going to die of death. I personally believe that we're looking at the likes of SharePoint as being a way to actually share documents internally. But again, to actually get people to buy into that concept is quite difficult at times, because it's allowing them to effectively trust a company like Microsoft. I'm firmly in the belief that Microsoft are still trying to, in some respects, get an identity when it comes to cloud computing. I personally believe that Office 365 came out as a knee-jerk reaction to the G Suite, or when Google released their platform several years ago now, and I think it caught Microsoft off guard. And in fairness to them, I think the Microsoft platform is a far better platform than Google. However, I think that there's still got a fair way to go.